Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're excited to have a nice group here to talk about and to listen to our topic today about building your IT roadmap. We've had a really great success with these coffee break technology series, wrapped up last month, really talking about Microsoft Teams and some educational information and ideas and strategies around Teams. And this month, in December, we thought we would pivot a little bit to some more strategic topics as people are looking to plan for 2021, maybe looking at budgets, trying to figure out how they plan for things, hopefully post-COVID. I like the sound of that a lot better than in the midst of COVID. And really, we feel that a critical part of that strategy needs to be an IT roadmap that not only looks at this year, maybe this quarter, the next 6 months, this year, but out onto the horizon a little bit, and make sure that your organizational goals have a technology alignment, so that if you're making decisions about technology short term, they'll help directionally support where the business is going long term. Joining me today to talk about our IT roadmap practice and strategies and tips is Nick Bambulis. Nick, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, Nick, maybe you could give us a little background on you and your experience, and maybe even a little bit of some experience you've had with helping organizations building out these roadmaps.
Sure. Well, first of all, I've been VCIO or virtual CIO for a little over 7 years now. Before coming to Elevity and Gordon Flesch, I was in multiple different IT management positions over the course of my career. Kind of done everything from being a one-man IT department up to having my own larger department filled with technical staff and a few roles in between. So my background is mostly around IT management and operational support, and I utilize all of my years of expertise to help our clients get to where they need to be in terms of technology. I mostly work with our small and medium-sized clients that don't have internal IT departments, let alone IT leadership within their organization. So I'm kind of a shared CIO resource across all of those small and medium-sized clients.
So the virtual word doesn't mean that you're not a real person, because you are. You're a human.
Definitely.
The virtual part is that we kind of leverage your CIO expertise to many clients instead of each one of them needing to have their own, because they couldn't afford one, maybe don't have the need for a full-time one. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that you are a real human.
No robot. Definitely flesh and blood.
Okay, good. All right.
Yes.
Well, a quick reminder: if you haven't participated in one of our coffee break series in the past, we would love to be able to do a Q&A, and we can't give answers unless we have questions. So there's a Q&A icon in the Zoom control box, the Zoom control bar, where you mute yourself and do other things. If you click that Q&A, you can post questions. I'll be monitoring those as Nick is filling us with all kinds of great information about technology roadmaps, and we'll try to get those answered during the discussion. So thanks for doing that. Nick, a lot of roadmap is around planning and is around looking at, the best practices and how to think where the organization is going. Let's start maybe a little bit with what some of the typical mistakes are that you see clients making when they're thinking about spend. They're looking at IT, maybe they don't have a great operational maturity around IT. What are some of the typical mistakes that you see or challenges from clients and prospects?
I'd say probably the one I see the most often is that some levels of organizations tend to look at IT as kind of a necessary evil, something that they just have to do in order to conduct business. And I think in the modern era, in today's day and age, what organizations should be doing is looking at technology as an investment that can align with their business goals and make an organization more profitable or make things more efficient. Use it, kind of weaponize it, right? Kind of use it as a strategic tool to help grow your business. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that and just let it be that operational piece, that kind of thing that just needs to be there, instead of using it as a tool to help further your organization. Another mistake that I see in small and medium-sized organizations is that oftentimes IT decisions are left to maybe an office manager or a middle management person that kind of wears that IT hat and oversees IT, even though they're not really an IT person, but they engage with the vendors, they make sure things are getting done right, and help make decisions. Talking about making IT a strategic weapon, that really needs ownership level engagement. And a lot of times, executives, C-levels, owners kind of hand off that IT piece to somebody else and let them do their thing. But I think they need to be a part of that process and be engaged so that they can help align that technology with the organization's goals so that the organization can become more efficient, so that we can use it to make things efficient and help grow the organization and accomplish the goals that have been set out.
And you work with a lot of clients as a VCIO, and you talk to a lot of organizations that are considering our services, and in some of your consulting engagements. What do you think that for organizations that don't have a good, strong practice and maybe are, the most technical person in the office becomes the IT person, what do you think the percentage is of people who actually have a plan?
A plan for IT, I'd say the definition of plan varies a lot from organization to organization. Most organizations would say, yes, they have a plan, but that plan may be, we get new computers every 4 or 5 years, and that's the extent of the plan. But organizations that are doing this right, that are sitting down together with all of the leadership team and hammering out how technology is going to advance the company and accomplish the goals, I'd say those percentages are much lower. We're probably in the 15-20% range, just from my own personal experience of people that have had that type of discussion. But really, aligning yourself with a strategic partner that can bring in the resources to help you build out that plan is really critical to making it successful.
Okay, good. We're talking about a plan, and I think I've used the word strategy a couple of times. Why is that important? Why do companies need to think about IT more strategically? What are the downsides of not doing it, and what are the benefits of sitting down and having those discussions?
And I've touched on a little bit of it already. Really, aligning the technology with the organization's goals accomplishes a number of things. It can make the organization more efficient, for sure. You can streamline processes. You can make your employees' lives easier. Make sure that they have well-running equipment at their disposal and things move the way they're supposed to be. And aside from that, you can also use that technology to change some of the business workflows and processes so that can free up people's time to do more of the things that leadership wants them to do. If you're in a sales organization, you want to free up that salesperson's time so they can go out and bring in more new business. Each time that they're dealing with a slow internal process or even a non-working computer, that stops them from achieving their goal. So really, we got to look at using things on a strategic level and not just saying we need this because we just need it to work, but we need it to work and we need to use it as a strategic weapon so that we can make the organization more efficient, so that we can accomplish the goals that we're going after and earn more income and revenue and get to the goals that we want to get to.
Yeah, I think we've seen some significant examples where a technology plan or lack of a technology plan not being aligned with long-term goals. We work with some pretty growth-oriented organizations that are actively in the M&A space and are hoping to grow and have a real strategic plan to grow through acquisition. But they didn't pass either those goals along or didn't think strategically about those goals to align with IT. And their infrastructure that they've put in place didn't line up with that goal, and so couldn't support the success that they had with that M&A. So that's one example where you're thinking about adding additional divisions or additional locations. Really looking to grow through an M&A strategy, which I think will be pretty active post-COVID for organizations that have been successful. I think there will be organizations that weren't successful that will be kind of ripe for M&A activity. But you have to have an infrastructure. You have to have the core components in place to be able to bolt on maybe a 50% increase in employees, or bolt on multiple locations maybe that are across the country or even internationally. And so things like that you maybe aren't thought of when the executive team is sitting around the boardroom talking about what the long-term growth strategies look like, and ensuring that you have the right foundation with infrastructure as technology becomes more and more important would be one example where that a plan for IT needs to line up with that longer-term organizational goal.
Yeah, There's a lot of talk in many different industries and verticals, and a lot of consulting practices that talk a lot about operational maturity, and that applies to all levels of the organization. IT, finance, HR. The higher your OML, your operational maturity level is within your organization, the more efficient your company runs, the more profitable it will be, the more revenue you're going to generate for your organization. And IT is obviously an integral piece in that operational maturity model because we all live and breathe with our computer systems today. We can't function without them. So the more mature that system is, the faster it is, the more efficient it is. That it just everything goes in the right direction, and you'll find it easier to accomplish those goals if you have those like and that higher operational maturity level.
All right, good. Well, I think we've laid the groundwork of why a plan is important and why thinking strategically is important. What does a roadmap, which is kind of the point of what we're talking about, do to help with that planning? How does it make a concept of thinking strategically seem more actionable and more easily digestible for our clients?
So we follow a bit of a process when we sit down with our clients to go through the technology roadmap. And believe it or not, what we start with isn't necessarily IT related at all. We're starting with business goals and top priorities for the organization. And we're kind of lining them up into three primary categories. You can see on the screen here. Most top priorities or goals for an organization usually fall into one of these three categories, whether it be profitability and growth, cost justification, or organizational efficiency. So we're sitting down with our clients and identifying what their top priorities are for the upcoming fiscal year, so that we can identify them. We also take a deeper dive into aligning the technology with individual functional areas within the business. How is technology? What are the requirements for the various functional areas within your organization, be it sales, operations, human resources and payroll, admin, support, and management, and what kind of impact does technology have on those areas? And a lot of times companies don't think about how each individual department or each individual functional area will need what they will need for technology in the coming fiscal year and how it can make their operations more efficient. So having these conversations, you can see, will help move things forward and get goals aligned properly so that we can get back to those top level goals that we identified at the beginning of the conversation. As we move through the technology roadmap, we kind of continue that business technology alignment, and we kind of look at the business activities that will require the most support for technology in the coming fiscal year. So you've laid out a bunch of goals earlier in our process, and how do we rank those goals in terms of needing support from technology? So are there pieces of technology or systems that need to be in place that will help drive those individual business activities that we're working towards, that we're striving towards over the fiscal year? So having all of these things put down on paper and having your leadership team talk through them and developing plans around them will help you align the technology with the business goals, help you become more operationally mature, and it just raises the bar. It's kind of the old adage of a rising tide raises all ships. So that's the overall goal with the technology roadmap, is to identify the business goals, align the technology with them so that we can have an easier path to accomplishing them.
I think I screw up that raising all tides adage often. So well done. You did it right. This looks pretty straightforward. It doesn't seem overly complicated what you just walked through. So why is it something that many organizations haven't done, or frankly some of our clients that don't make the time to sit down to do this? Do you feel that most clients feel like, oh, we're going to talk about strategy and technology roadmap, and this is going to be a big, grueling, long process? It seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it definitely is. And our team does work hard to make it an easy process, to make it a somewhat enjoyable process. And most of this information, the leaders in your organization have already. They have these pieces. Even if they haven't talked about it as a team, they've got it in their minds, and they know what direction they want to go in. I've had clients tell me that after we've gone through some of these discussions, and these are just samples of the document, there's obviously more to it, but like Jeff said, it is a pretty straightforward process. But I've had clients tell me that after we've gone through the process, they've told me, the three of us or the five of us, in talking about the leadership of the organization, we've never really sat down and hammered out the goals and the activities that are needed to accomplish those goals. I mean, we've had strategy meetings. We've talked about where we want to go in the next fiscal year, but we've not gotten it down on paper. We've not really sat down and identified. And I've seen these conversations, start off, focused on aligning technology with business goals, and it ends up snowballing into a much larger operational strategic conversation about the business goals for the next fiscal year. And I've really seen, executives and owners really get engaged in this process and have a much more rich conversation than they thought they were going to have when they first started off this process. So it really can be beneficial, not just from an IT perspective, but just from your own internal strategy discussions. It really helps expand them out and make you focus on individual areas and what little things need to be done in HR or in sales or in management to help make things more efficient or to help drive towards those top level goals that you've identified.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I want to follow up on that. But as a reminder, for our guests, if you do have some questions, please feel free to throw those in the Q&A icon, the Q&A box in that Zoom control panel. I think that's a really good point that you just brought up, and we're here to talk about IT strategy and IT roadmap and kind of IT. That's what we do. But it is a component of a larger conversation that we do encourage our clients to have, that we do encourage clients to allow us to be part of, because all of those things are intermingled and connected and interconnected. And if we want to help our clients have long-term success, which is part of our mission, is to better manage technology so our clients can achieve their business goals and have the success that they want to have. And I think that's where we have helped, probably in some cases to a greater degree, is to bring those conversations to the table. Because you start talking about IT and long-term goals, and somebody says, well, I didn't think that was our long-term goal. I thought it was this one. And before you know it, an hour later, they've really kind of catalyzed what that direction looks like. And then we can get back to how IT is going to support it. So I think that's a great point. It's probably one of the most valuable conversations that we're allowed to participate in as a partner with our clients.
Yeah, and it really makes us feel good to hear those kinds of conversations, because we know we're driving down the right path, and the engagement that we get out of leadership and the excitement that's generated in those types of meetings. I mean, every business owner that's out there, they want to talk about their business. They want to talk about their goals. They want to talk about what they want to accomplish in the next fiscal year. And they get excited about that process and identifying these goals. That's why they're leaders in their organization. So it's really fun for us to be a part of those discussions and help be a part of it and help them get to where they need to be.
Yeah, any really interesting stories of conversations or of direction changes, kind of aha moments? I mean, you mentioned a couple where you mentioned the one where you've heard from clients that maybe this is one of the most rewarding conversations they've had, or one that they haven't really had to sit down and hammer that out. But any other interesting anecdotes from your experience?
Well, there's always stories. They're all fairly similar. I mean, the ones that are the best are always that aha moment, like you said, when the leaders get together at the table or the virtual table today and look at each other and say, yeah, those are the goals, but I didn't think you quite meant that. I've had a few organizations really change their direction because they thought they were aligned on what the goals were and how they're going to accomplish them. But then going through the steps and going through the process really highlighted that, well, I think the COO had a little bit different idea on how to accomplish that than the CFO. And I've really seen them take that deeper dive into what they want to accomplish and really iron out the details. And and sometimes in these meetings, I end up just sitting back and letting them discuss because I don't want to say we go down a rabbit hole, but they get into such engrossed conversation about the goals and how they want to accomplish them that we kind of take a little bit of a sidebar, let them hammer it out, because once they've done that, we have a better, clear view of how we're going to proceed and what steps or actions we need to take to accomplish those goals.
A question that just came in, thanks for asking, is, okay, so you build a roadmap, you do have this discussion, then what? Is it a static document that they just kind of refer back to? How does the roadmap become an integral part of a decision-making process?
So the roadmap is definitely a living, breathing document. It's not something that stays static. So we first develop it, and that's a large amount of the work is the front end of putting it together, and that before that first fiscal year starts. But then as the fiscal year moves on, we generally meet with our clients on a quarterly basis. So we'll be providing updates to that document as the year progresses. And then once we get near the end of that fiscal year, we'll pull that whole document out again and kind of rehash it for the next fiscal year. Because much like everything else, the goals for next year are going to be different from the goals this year, or maybe tweaked slightly. So we'll have a lighter version of the first process again, where we re-identify the goals and set different priorities and expectations, and which ultimately might lead to different types of IT projects or investments that need to be made, in the coming fiscal year. So the document never really ends. It just kind of evolves as the business goals evolve over time.
Yeah, probably similar to a strategic plan, right? You have those great meetings. They're super fun. They're offsite at some hotel, and you have a nice dinner, and everybody puts that thing together. And if it goes in a drawer and is brought back up a year ago or a year later, it doesn't have much value. But it's not something that you look at every week. It really sets the direction, and then the real world happens. I'm assuming that most people who are listening did not have on their strategic plan a year ago dealing with a worldwide pandemic. So that
Yep.
strategy has to adjust and has to be flexible to be able to absorb things that happen and things
Yep.
that change. And the IT plan really shouldn't be any different.
Yeah, and this year is obviously a really great example of how the best laid plans can get easily disrupted, and obviously with all the changes that have happened this past year, IT has made significant changes in what is needed and how we advance a company, or in some cases keep a company afloat. There are many different models, many different things that can be done in the IT space to save organizations money. Not just from an operational efficiency standpoint, but from investments in hardware. We've had organizations that have struggled a bit through the changes with COVID, and their verticals have been hit very hard. And we've seen interesting trends come out of that. One of the interesting trends that we've seen is that those that have maybe made the investment or change into a cloud-based infrastructure can weather that storm a little bit easier than those that went the traditional route and bought a bunch of hardware, bought a bunch of servers. They still have that cost that they have to deal with, but with the cloud model, it's subscription-based service, so they can easily spin down servers they don't need and reduce their IT spend very quickly over the course of a month, and then spin them back up when the business picks up and when things are busier again. So it's really been interesting over the past 6 months to see the different changes and the different dynamics that have come out of this really rare situation that we've all been forced into. But definitely highlights the need for having good plans and having some flexibility and being able to adjust as time moves on.
Yeah, I think with any plan, it's easier to adjust when you had a plan than to hope that the adjustment is in accordance with a plan that wasn't really laid out.
Mm-hmm.
As they say, hope is not a strategy. One of the things that we had in the advertisement for the webinar, or the way that we had built the topic, is how to potentially build one of these on your own, or to start to think about how to build one of these. So let's say somebody, one of the audience members is thinking, well, this really does make sense. What would we recommend that they do to get started?
To get started, it really goes back to some of the slides that I had talked about earlier about identifying the goals and figuring out how technology will affect those goals, or what investments can be made. And it really starts with just having those conversations with leadership. I mean, if you're an office manager that's responsible for IT, bring leadership into those meetings. They may fight you, but they may not want to be there, but you might have to sell them a little bit and be convincing that their participation is needed, so that we can identify all of the business goals and the direction in which the organization is going. Because without knowing where we're going, we won't know what tools we need to put in place to get you there. And starting that process early, before the fiscal year begins, hammering out those goals, seeing how the individual departments and processes are going to be affected with technology and those goals, is really the path to start on. Great. And of course, you can always engage a technology vendor like us that will help bring in resources to help you develop these documents as well. I mean, our VCIO services are part of our offering for the small and medium-sized managed services clients. So if you are a customer of ours today, you have these resources at your disposal, and all this work can be done, and we can help you with that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think as with anything, the first step is to start to take steps. It's easier to start making small steps than it is to wait and make one huge leap. So you want to start to think about, do you have a plan, and could you benefit from one? And is there a strategic component of how IT is thought through? And is there a strategic plan in place kind of in general? And yeah, I would recommend the first step is to, engage a levity and see in your partners and contacts at a levity to see what we could do to help how we could get started on this process. If we have brought up a technology roadmap to you in the past or haven't, and you'd like to re-engage that, of course, we'd love to get started on that sooner than later. But I think just taking some of these concepts and starting to think through what is most important and do we have the right things in place would be a good place to start. So I think that brings us to the end of our discussion. Nick, really great content. Thanks for sharing your experience. Thanks to all those that participated in the questions that were asked. We'd be happy to help if we can. Don't hesitate to reach out to us at Levity IT to provide some of that expertise and further the discussion. We've got a couple other strategic topics on the coffee break series for the month of December. So feel free to register for those. We look forward to seeing some of the familiar faces or familiar names that have been attending these over the last, throughout the series that we've had in place. I would encourage you to, reach out and suggest any topics if you'd like to hear. If we're, bringing up some good content, but there's one or two topics that you'd really love to hear about that we haven't talked about yet. We'd love to have this be more meaningful for you. Of course, we can always come up with our own topics, but if we have some input from our clients and attendees, we'd love to bring that topic up in a future coffee break series as well. So thanks again, everyone. Happy December. Have a great weekend. Thanks again, Nick, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
You too.